The price of oil is probably about to spike in a very big way, and along with it, the price of just about everything else. And there's a development today which is likely to contribute to this surge in the price of crude oil, and along with it, the price of pretty much everything else. And what I'm talking about here, it has to do with Yemen and Israel and Saudi Arabia. And as you can see here from this image that we're looking at, this is from Zero Hedge. And this kind of gives you an idea of why Saudi Arabia right now is getting concerned. This red circle here around Yemen, this shows you where they have been causing trouble, attacking shipping, disrupting Red Sea shipping, also disrupting oil tankers transiting the Bab el-Mandeb Strait here. Up until this point, their activity, recent activity, has largely been constrained to this region. Recently, there was an attack targeting Tel Aviv. It was actually allegedly targeting the U.S. consulate in Tel Aviv by a Yemeni drone, and it managed to slip through Israeli air defenses. This is reportedly due to human error, but nonetheless, it was a fatal attack within Tel Aviv. The first attack by Yemen to slip through Israeli air defenses in this way. And if you just look at where they are operating now, from Yemen all the way to Israel, clearly if that's the operational range of these munitions being fired out of Yemen, then that puts Saudi Arabia, the entirety of Saudi Arabia, well within range of an attack. Now, if that does happen, if Yemen launches attacks on critical oil infrastructure within Saudi Arabia, that could be the trigger for spiking oil prices and surging inflation around the world. And that will have far-reaching impacts on the global economy and also on the domestic economy here in the United States. And as such, it's not financial advice, but it might be a good idea as we watch this play out to at least have some exposure to assets and investments that benefit from rising energy prices, so that as the cost of living increases along with energy and just about everything else that touches, at least you'll have some hedge against that in the form of appreciating assets. Another hedge that will likely increase in a significant way in the event of a regional war in the Middle East is safe haven assets, and traditional safe haven assets that move significantly higher on economic crises or geopolitical events, and this could shape up to be both of those things, are gold and silver. Now, if you want to get some gold and silver, make sure you check out SD Bullion, today's video sponsor. That's where I buy my gold and silver. Now, this is a video of the Israeli retaliation against this Yemeni attack on Tel Aviv, and this was an airstrike targeting Hodeidah, the primary Yemen port, and this is an oil refining facility which, as you can see, was engulfed in flame following those airstrikes. And the Houthis now have reportedly sworn revenge against Israel for this attack, and their language, they say there will be no red lines, meaning that they will not abide by any rules of engagement. They're saying that they could target civilians. There's no red lines to be crossed in their retaliation. Now, initially, that's clearly a sign that we may be around the corner from a major escalation if they do target some particularly sensitive facility or area for the Israelis, but also it's very likely that the Houthis view the U.S. and Israel sort of as one and the same in terms of their conflict here, evidenced by their attacks against U.S. naval vessels in the Red Sea thus far. And, the U.S. is the major ally of Israel in the region. They're major backers, major suppliers of military aid. And if the Houthis really wanted to attack a target that would harm the U.S., especially economically, well, driving the price of crude oil up globally would be a pretty effective way to do that. Saudi Arabia is aware of this risk following the attack on Tel Aviv and the retaliatory strike by Israel on Hodeidah. The Saudi Foreign Ministry has made a statement saying that the attacks aggravate the current tension in the region, and it also halts the ongoing efforts to end the war on Gaza. they are calling on all parties to exercise maximum restraint. And it's certainly in Saudi interest for that to be the case. And I think they're getting a little bit concerned as they see these exchanges between Israel and the Houthis accelerating. Now, at the same time, the Saudi defense minister made a statement that they were not involved in targeting Hodeidah. So they want to make sure that it's clear to Yemen that they were not involved in that attack. And so clearly they're concerned about retaliation. And they also mentioned that they will not allow any entity to violate its airspace. So you can kind of read between the lines there and understand what it is they are concerned about. Now, this is from Zero Hedge. This circle represents what is within the range of attack by Yemen. And you'll notice there's a few key things here. You got the Suez Canal, you've got the entirety of Saudi Arabia, the world's #1 oil exporter. You have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, where they've been already causing a lot of problems. But you also have the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical checkpoint through which a huge portion of global oil production flows every single day. If they're able to shut down that or target tankers that are transiting the Strait of Hormuz, that could immediately lead to a massive financial shock. Now, in this article by Zero Hedge, they cite David Asher, who is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and is also a former State Department official from the Trump administration. And he has previously pointed out that the next financial crisis could originate in the Middle East through the weaponization of crude oil by Iran. Another scenario that he has posited here is that Yemen's Houthi rebels could begin targeting high-value oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. And there's a slide here from a presentation he gave recently which shows where in 2019, Iran targeted Saudi oil storage facilities in Abqaiq, and if they had been aimed at the cooling towers of the facility, that could have destroyed the entire facility, which would have cut off 5% of global output for months. So it gives you an idea of how serious an attack on some of this critical infrastructure within Saudi Arabia could be. One of the tactics that we've seen in the Ukraine conflict is repeated attacks by Ukraine across the Russian border at Russian energy facilities using drones. And this wouldn't even be unprecedented in the modern era. There are already attacks like this occurring in a different regional conflict. So it's not that much of a stretch to see that in the Middle East theater. And this is not just speculation by former State Department officials. As recently as March of this year, the Houthis threatened to target Saudi Arabia oil installations for supporting U.S. aggression. So the Saudis and the U.S. are allies. Yemen and the Saudis have a long history of conflict, and they have already recently threatened to target this infrastructure. So this is a threat that we should take seriously. And it was as recently as just a little over 2 years ago in March of 2022 that Yemen actually successfully launched missile and drone strikes against Saudi energy facilities, creating fires. So it is within the technical capabilities of the Houthis to launch attacks of this sort and be successful. This wouldn't even be entirely without precedent. Now, this is a very significant problem if they do manage to disrupt Saudi oil production and refining, because currently they produce a very significant chunk of the world's oil. They produce 9.7 million barrels per day, or at least that was the figure from last year. The U.S. in the #1 position produces only 12.9, so they are a huge producer. They're in the #3 spot, right after the U.S. and Russia. But perhaps more importantly is they are not the world's biggest producer, but they are the world's biggest exporter, meaning they have the biggest surplus. So they are the ones who export it around the world. The U.S. produces a lot of oil, but we consume a ton of oil. But Saudi oil is very important for supplying the globe. If their supply is disrupted, that means the price of oil is going to spike everywhere. So this is the chart to keep an eye on, the price of crude oil, which has just kind of been churning sideways despite all of these developments in the Middle East since October 7th, but guaranteed if Yemen begins targeting Saudi oil facilities, well, this is going to spike up in a big way and the consolidation will be over. And it does appear, based on the long consolidation, that the oil market is set up for a big move here. One further consideration in a scenario where you have the price of oil spiking is the effect that that will have on the U.S. and global economy in terms of inflation. Inflation will almost certainly rise immediately as the cost of many goods are tied to crude oil. But More importantly, this is going to have a big impact on U.S. monetary policy. This is the CME FedWatch tool. Currently, markets are pricing in a nearly 100% chance of rate cuts by the Federal Reserve in September. Now, if inflation spikes due to soaring energy costs, those rate cut odds are going to drop significantly. And markets are already pricing in a return to easy money. So if all of a sudden rate cuts are off the table because of surging energy and surging inflation, then that means the probability of a major financial crisis in the US is going to go up significantly. So this is really something we need to keep an eye on. And if the Houthis did want to target the US in an economic sense, this would probably be one way that they could accomplish this in a relatively straightforward manner. So leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. What can we do to get prepared for this? What are the odds of a regional war in the Middle East driving the price of oil through the roof? And if it does happen, what will be the consequences? Leave a comment down below to let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.